Hi everyone, the Partial Prophet here. Thanks for tuning in. So I wanted to remind you that we know in part and we prophesy in part, and then when Jesus comes, we will see fully. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the covenant with many, and that now we know who the Antichrist is. Okay, so what I believe the covenant with many is this hostage deal that they just made, that they had at the end of last month in Israel. Okay. And so Jeremiah 6:1 says, "They have healed the brokenness of my people superficially, saying peace, peace, but there is no peace." Okay. So it's been very interesting that ever since this war started, everybody's been pressuring Israel to have ceasefires and pauses in fighting, and other things, rather than letting Israel fight against its enemy, Hamas. Okay. So the war in Israel started October 7th. And remember, it was really terrible on October 7th. They killed 1,400 people and took, I think it was like 240 hostages on that day. And I mean, Hamas was just, is a very cruel, I mean, they're terrorists. I mean, bottom line is they're terrorists. They did torture. They, just did slaughter. They sexually abused the women. They desecrated the bodies. Okay, so Hamas is just true evil. Okay. But we've been watching the world kind of picking sides during this war. Okay. And so I definitely think that's revealing what's in people's hearts. Okay. Well, so then what happened was Israel and Hamas. Okay, so this is from NBC News. Okay, and it was posted on November 21st, and they updated it on November 22nd. So I think the deal was kind of announced on the 21st, and then Israel voted on it to accept it on the 22nd. Okay. So it says Israel and Hamas reached deal to release 50 hostages and pause fighting for 4 days in Gaza. The deal will also see 150 Palestinians released from Israeli jails. It comes after weeks of closely guarded negotiations in Qatar, which acted as a broker along with the U.S. and Egypt. Okay, so the Biden administration was right in there working on this deal. Okay. And so the deal included delivery of hundreds of aid trucks into Gaza. They wanted Israel to provide these aid trucks into Gaza. Okay. And then they were going to allow the fuel trucks to enter Gaza. Okay. Israel didn't want fuel to go in there because they knew Hamas would use it to run their underground bunkers and other things related to war. Okay. It was announced early Wednesday local time, which is late Tuesday Eastern time, by Qatar. Israel's government approved the deal early Wednesday local time. Israeli drones will stop flying over the strip for 6 hours a day. The deal includes an option to extend the pause in exchange for 10 hostages released per day, the Israeli officials said. So make note that originally this deal was a 4-day deal, okay, but it did end up getting extended to be a week long, okay. And so I put this in here. This is a bad deal for Israel. I mean, no other country has had to put up with the pressure that Israel is getting when it comes to fighting this war. I mean, nobody is in Russia telling Putin how he should fight his war against the Ukrainians. I mean, it's just, Israel has had to, the rules are always different for Israel. And it has a lot to do with that they're, part of God's chosen people. Okay. So now that it's over, I mean, the thing is it put a pause in the fighting, which allowed Hamas to kind of catch its breath and, you know, like kind of regroup. Um, I mean, we did get some hostages back, so that was a good thing. But the Palestinians that got released, because what did they say? 150 Palestinians. Okay, these aren't just normal civilians. Okay, the Palestinians that were in jail, they were um, combatants, or criminals. I mean, they were like, a bunch of them are like some of those teenage kids that stood at the border and threw rocks and fireballs at Israeli troops. Um, and you know, or other people, there were other people that like helped, were either terrorists themselves or helped the terrorists. I mean, one of the ladies was a suicide bomber. um, and when they released her from jail, um, they showed like a before and after picture of her to make it look like Israel was torturing her when she was in jail. But they didn't note the fact that the reason why she looked worse after she got out of jail is because her bomb that she was trying to set off actually started a fire and burnt her. Okay. So there's just this whole propaganda war going on. Um, I mean, Hamas is a very awful enemy because not only do they not have any value for human life, but they fight a really good propaganda war. Okay. And Israel just is, you know, just really backed into a corner because of this. Um, so, um, let's see. So, I talked about the peace and safety aspect of this war in the last video. I mean, they were seriously talking about peace and safety um, before this war started. Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel, and then Biden, um, you know, the president of America, and then Saudi Arabia were all talking about this peace deal that they were trying to get together between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Okay. And then we know from the scriptures that when they're saying peace and safety, then there be sudden destruction. Okay. So we saw sudden destruction happen in Israel. Okay. Um, but then in Daniel 9, we read about this firm covenant. Okay. Now, okay, this is my biggest complaint about some of the other prophets is that someone came up with a scenario that the Antichrist was going to make a covenant with Israel for 7 years, and then in the middle of the covenant he was going to break the covenant, um, and stop sacrifice in the temple of Israel. Okay, so everyone's been waiting for a 7-year covenant, even though it actually says 1 week in the verse. Okay. um, you know, so everyone's been waiting for a 7-year covenant, and then they'll say they know who the Antichrist is. Okay. Well, the problem is if you come to the Bible with preconceived ideas, you might miss what's actually happening in the world, um, because, you know, you skip over the verses you think you know how they're going to play out, and then you don't like recognize, hey, maybe this verse is actually connected to Biden's hostage deal. Okay. And that's what I really think it is. I really think it's connected to Biden's hostage deal. I mean, I also believe in multiple fulfillments, and I'll talk about another way this verse was fulfilled earlier in history. But with Biden, so it says, okay, so the New American Standard Bible, the way it writes this verse, Daniel 9:27, it says, and he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. Okay, well, I have the ESV translation of this verse, and I think it actually helps us understand a little bit more how this connects to what Biden just did. Okay, how this connects to the hostage deal, because it says, and he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator. So I highlighted half a week because the original deal was actually a 4-day deal. Okay. So I wrote here the hostage deal was originally for 4 days, half a week. And then Israel and Hamas extended it for 2 or 3 more days. I'm not really sure. And so this deal was made with many, like, Israel was involved in it, Hamas was involved in it. It involved other countries too, because they had hostages too. And so their hostages, some of the other hostages were going to get released. So what we got to understand to how this connects to the hostage deal is we got to understand the phrase "a stop to sacrifice and grain offering." Okay. So in Revelation 6, I wrote it. I mean, it says, when the Lamb broke the 5th seal, I saw underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and because of the testimony which they had maintained. And they cried out with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, will you refrain from judging and avenging our blood on those who dwell on the earth? And there was given to each of them a white robe, and they were told that they should rest for a little while longer, until the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who were to be killed, even as they had been, would be completed also. Okay. So this is a picture in heaven, okay? And so we have the souls of the people who were killed, that were martyred for following God, okay? What's interesting is that it's the 5th seal. Well, October 7th, the start of this war in Israel, was 50 years after the Yom Kippur War, okay? So that could connect to the 5th seal. And then I believe that under this altar includes both the Jewish and the Christian martyrs who got killed because they love God, okay? And so we see a picture of the souls under the altar, and they're wondering how much longer. It's like, when are you going to wrap this all up, and when are you going to judge the nations, God, for killing us? Okay. And so what was God's answer? He said, I mean, one, they were given a white robe, but he said they had a little bit more time to rest, and that other people would be joining them under the altar. Okay. More souls were going to die. We're going to be martyred. Okay. On earth. Okay. So what I believe, okay, so then in Exodus 29, we read about, okay, now this is what you shall offer on the altar. Okay. So I think this is for dedicating the altar. God wanted them to offer 2 one-year-old lambs each day continuously. The one lamb you shall offer in the morning, and the other one you shall offer at twilight. And there shall be 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with 1/4 of a hin of beaten oil, and 1/4 of a hin of wine for a drink offering with one lamb. The other lamb you shall offer at twilight, and shall offer it with the same grain offering and the same drink offering as in the morning, for a soothing aroma, an offering by fire to the Lord. Okay, so what I believe is that these pictures could be a prophetic shadow of how the sacrifices that were offered in the morning are a picture of the sacrifices, the people that got martyred during the Holocaust. Okay. And during the Holocaust, we saw both Christians and Jews got martyred, like, especially if there was Christians that were helping out the Jewish people or hiding the Jewish people, they would get killed by the Nazis. Okay. So there was, but there was other groups of people too that got sacrificed, that got killed during the Holocaust. And then now we have this current war. So what I believe is that this current war in Israel is the twilight time, okay? And so we could think of twilight as kind of the last days, okay? Um, and and the way it's described, it's very similar to what the sacrifice that was offered in the morning, okay? So, and what's interesting about this war is that Israel was attacked on October 7th, and then on October 17th, I believe is the date, the American troops in, okay, so we have American troops stationed in Syria and Iraq, okay? And on October 17th, some of the other Iranian proxies, like I'm not exactly sure, like Palestinian Islamic Jihad or just other Islamic Jihad, but I mean, they're all kind of from the same cloth. They started attacking American bases in Iraq and Syria. Okay, so so Americans too are in a way being called to sacrifice during this war, like put their lives on the line, and like to their lives are in danger. Okay, and then we know that Jewish soldiers, the IDF, it's men and women in the Israeli army, their lives are all on the line, and so many are dying in war, okay, in this war. And so that would be a type of sacrifice and grain offering, okay? And so with the hostage deal, so it says for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. Okay. So what I believe is that Biden set up this deal, okay, and he wanted to put a stop to the fighting in Israel for 4 days, okay, half a week, okay. But then it ended up getting extended, okay. And and so and I talked about how it's dangerous for Israel to kind of put a stop to this war, okay? I mean, and then earlier, before Biden even made this deal, he was trying to get Israel to do pauses, 4-hour pauses, okay? So we've seen that type of behavior with Biden, okay? He's trying to put a stop to this war, okay? And or like set limits on how the war can be fought. I mean, he's just really sticking his nose into it. Okay. So that's what I believe. So I think then we can believe that since Biden and his administration were the ones involved with this covenant, then we can believe that he is the anti-Christ type figure that we're looking for. And we really shouldn't be surprised, because if we see Biden's actions, we could see, okay, like he claims to be a big friend of Israel and he claims to be a big friend of Netanyahu, and they both of them claim like, they're best buddies from years ago and all that kind of stuff. But then when you see Biden's actions toward Israel, like it's a little muddied, because occasionally he'll do a nice thing, like I mean just this week I guess he's letting them have some tank ammunition, which he approved without it going through Congress. But then really when you look at most of his actions, he's really kind of getting in the way of Israel being able to fight this war the way that they need to. And I really think it's possible that if they didn't put all this pressure on Israel at the beginning, that maybe Israel's troops could have ran and, gone into Gaza quicker and faster and found the hostages faster? Who knows? Okay, we don't know for sure. Okay, but that's a possibility. So that's what I think. Okay, so let's look at more of Daniel 9. Okay, because if Daniel 9:27 is just been fulfilled, then we should see that more of Daniel 9 is being fulfilled. Okay. So it says, I, Daniel, observed in the books the number of the years which was revealed as the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet for the completion of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. Now, while I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God in behalf of the holy mountain of my God, while I was still speaking in prayer, then the man Gabriel, who I had seen in the vision previously, came to me in my extreme weariness about the time of the evening offering. 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for iniquity, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal a vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. Okay? So, we saw fulfillment of the 70 years when Trump moved the American embassy to Jerusalem at the 70th year of Israel. Okay, so Daniel 9 is really interesting because it's kind of like Daniel was saying, okay, God, it's 70 years. Now we're waiting for you to do your stuff, okay, to fulfill all your promises. And really, it's like God sent Gabriel to say, well, yeah, you're looking for 70 years, but then there's a few more time frames that you need to wait through, okay? So we didn't see like the Messiah come back at 70 years. We saw Trump at 70 years, and he is not the Messiah. He's another false Messiah type figure, okay? But I believe that was like a start of, like a fulfillment of prophecy, okay, of like really kind of maybe the start of the last days, kind of. Although really the last days kind of started when Obama became president, is what I think. Um, but like when Trump moved the American embassy, I think that was the start of like Trump's false signs, false messianic signs. Okay. Um, and then it's interesting, it talks about the man Gabriel coming about the time of the evening offering. So remember how I said that I think this war in Israel is a picture of the evening offering? So Gabriel actually could be a picture of Netanyahu, like kind of showing up at the time of the evening offering. Okay. And then let's see. Then Gabriel talks about these 70 weeks. Okay. Okay. So we've already seen one fulfillment of the 70 weeks. And that's why if you watch my videos around the 70-week time frame, I was really looking for the Messiah at that time, because I'm like, well, we've had the 70 years and we've had the 70 weeks. But now with Biden, we've seen a second fulfillment of these 70 weeks. Okay, because what happened with Trump and Netanyahu, 70 weeks after they signed the deal of the century, they were no longer in power. Okay. But now with Biden, it was actually 70 weeks, 7 days after Biden signed his paper with Lapid on July 14, 2022, is when this hostage deal was announced, November 21st. Okay. Actually, I think November 21st is the 70-week 6th day. Okay. And then one of the motivations for the deal was to try to put a stop to what Israel was doing in Gaza, because the world was seeing it as a bad thing, as this quote unquote slaughter, genocide, ethnic cleansing. Okay, that's what I wrote. So fascinating that this hostage deal happened 70 weeks after Biden signed his paper with Lapid. Okay. So on July 14, 2022, Biden signed this paper with Lapid. Lapid was the prime minister of Israel at that time. Okay. And in the paper, Biden talked about like two-state solution. Okay, so it was clear in this paper that Biden wanted to divide the land of Israel. Okay, and we saw with the deal of the century with Trump, um, that, I mean, it was clear with his deal of the century that Trump wanted to divide the land and give some of it to, he had his own unique, so he says, deal, two-state solution for Israel. Okay, but we saw how God brought judgment because of Trump. Like, all they did was, Trump and Netanyahu signed that paper, and then 70 weeks later they lost power. Okay. Um, and so it's after the 70 weeks for Biden. So I think we can look, um, for Biden to be losing his power in the near future. Okay. Okay, and so like I said in my last video, I talked about peace and safety. Okay, and that comes from 1 Thessalonians 5. Now as to the times and epochs, brethren, you have no need of anything to be written to you, for you yourselves know full well that the day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night. While they are saying peace and safety, then destruction will come upon them suddenly, like labor pains upon a woman with child, and they will not escape. But you, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day will overtake you like a thief. So I talked about this in my last video, but I think we're seeing, so we saw one fulfillment was, so Netanyahu, Biden, the Saudis, and others were running around talking about the Saudi deal. Okay. And in the meantime, there was flare-ups on the Gaza Strip. Okay. And so it was interesting because Netanyahu wasn't really paying attention to what was happening on the Gaza Strip. He was so busy running around talking about this Saudi deal and how it was going to change the face of the Middle East. And, so we really kind of missed that destruction was coming. Okay, he missed kind of the clues on the Gaza border. Okay, and so then we saw with Israel that destruction came suddenly. Okay. But I think now we're in a second fulfillment, because I think during this war in Israel, we've had all these people around the world that have been doing like anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian protest, like demanding a ceasefire, which would be a type of peace and safety in Israel. Okay. And so then what I think at some point God's going to bring judgment on all these people that are against Israel. Okay, destruction's going to come upon them suddenly. Okay, so I think we're going to see a second fulfillment. So like I said, this peace and safety, this is happening now. The worldwide call for a ceasefire in Gaza is a form of peace and safety. But whose safety are they really concerned about? Okay, they're not really concerned about God's people, the Jewish people in Israel. They're concerned about the Palestinians. Okay. Okay, so what we gotta be aware of is that there's two types of enemies of God's people. Okay. And so Israel has two types of enemies. Okay, we get this from the Bible. So we read in the Bible, we know that Israel's like God's chosen people. And I personally believe that, okay, so there was 12 tribes in Israel and they got divided, and the like 2.5 tribes or 3 tribes kind of became the Jewish people, and then there's 10 missing tribes. And what I believe is that the 10 missing tribes are really the Christians in the world, is what I believe. Okay, that God's people got divided, and then like the 10 tribes are kind of hidden or missing, but I believe it's the Christians. And so I really believe that America kind of becomes like representative of the 10 missing tribes, and then Israel represents, like, it's the only Jewish state in the world. Okay. Because a huge majority of the Jewish people are in Israel. Okay. And so what's interesting is that you see these enemies of Israel they hate both America and Israel. I mean, Iran wants to see both America and Israel wiped off the map. Okay. So if the enemy recognizes that God has two countries right now that really represent his people, why don't we recognize that? Um, um, but in the Bible, we read about the two types of enemies that Israel can face. Okay, one of them is obviously the worst enemy would be the ones that want to kill the Jewish people. Okay, so we read about that in the book of Esther. Haman the Persian wanted to kill all the Jewish people. So today we see a fulfillment of that where Hamas is an Iranian proxy. Okay, Iran would be a Persian, you know, country. Okay, like they would descend from the Persians. Okay. What's really interesting is that we have Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthi rebels, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad all want to wipe Israel off the map. They're all influenced and financed by Iran. Okay, so it's interesting. We got kind of the three H's. Okay, Hamas, are the ones in Gaza. Hezbollah are the ones in Lebanon. The Houthi rebels are the one in Yemen. Okay, and they're lobbing missiles over toward Israel. Okay, because they want to kill Jews in Israel. Okay, all influenced and financed by Iran. Okay, we also have other similar groups going after the American troops in Iraq and Syria. Okay, so I think they're all from the same cloth. Okay, they're all kind of influenced by Iran. Okay, so we're seeing a repeat in history. We have, like the Persian wanting to kill all the Jewish people. Okay, but then another type of enemy would be, okay, so we read in Genesis 34 about there's this guy. It's interesting because his name is Hamor. How would you say that? Hamor, and his son Shechem. They wanted Israel. Okay, so this is actually, it'd be Jacob and his sons to mix and mingle with them. Okay, so this is another type of enemy. It would be the type of enemy that wants God's people to mix and mingle with the nations. Okay, they want them to stop following their crazy religious ways and just do the same things that the nation does. Okay, so Hamor and his son Shechem, they wanted to mix and mingle. Okay, and what we're seeing, which is really interesting, because right now we're in the middle of Hanukkah. Okay, the story of Hanukkah is also about someone trying to get rid of Israel by getting them to mix and mingle. Okay, and so they actually call that like the Hellenization of Israel, because at that time frame when the story of Hanukkah happened, the foundation of the holiday of Hanukkah, it was actually the Greeks that were trying to get the Jewish people to be like them, to stop following Sabbath, to stop circumcising their boys, and so they were trying to get the Jewish people to mix and mingle. And what happens during Hanukkah is that there's this group of people that rise up and say, no, we're not going to mix and mingle with you. Okay. So what I think is that now, okay, so Hamas would be the Haman type figure, but I think Biden would be like the Hamor type figure. I believe he's the beast of the sea. He's the warm waters. Okay, so instead of being hot or cold, he's warm. Okay, and God says about the church in Revelation that's warm is he wants to spit them out of his mouth. Okay, he wants them to be either hot or cold. And it's interesting because when I think about being hot or cold, it would be like those people that believe in good and evil would be the hot and cold people. Okay. And so the warm waters would be kind of this mixing of, well, you don't really have the, the strong division of good and evil. It's all kind of mixed together in the warm waters. Okay. And so I wrote, Biden wants Israel to accept his religion. Okay. Where there's no such thing as good and evil, everyone is basically good. So So Biden believes that Israel should learn to coexist with the Palestinians and only fight a quote unquote righteous war according to Biden's standards. So Biden's trying to push his belief system onto Israel and how they fight this war. Okay. But some people in Israel understand, when they read the Bible, they understand that um, there's good and evil in the world, and that God's people have enemies that are trying to wipe them out. And, God says, don't live with them. Don't live with the nations. Don't mix with the nations. Really, you just need to get rid of them, you know? Um, so, so we're seeing that happening, playing out right now in our time frame. So, um, and then, okay, so let's look at the timing of this deal. Okay. So remember that the Saudi deal happened at 1290 days. So on August 9th was 1290 days after Trump's deal of the century. That was when the Wall Street Journal announced US and Saudi Arabia peace deal. Okay. So in Daniel 12, we read, "But as for you, Daniel, conceal these words and seal up the book until the end of time. Many will go back and forth, and knowledge will increase." Excuse me. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, two others were standing, one on this bank of the river, and the other on that bank of the river. And one said to the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river, "How long will it be until the end of these wonders?" I heard the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river as he raised his right hand and his left toward heaven and swore by him who lives forever that it would be for times, and half a time. And as soon as they finish shattering the power of the holy people, all these will be completed. As for me, I heard but could not understand. So I said, "My Lord, what will be the outcome of these events?" Okay, so let's unpack these verses. So Daniel was told to conceal these words and seal up the book until the end of time. Okay, so what I believe is that so Israel was getting ready before, when the day that they got attacked was the day they were supposed to celebrate Simchat Torah, which is when they actually open up their scrolls. Okay. And they actually dance around with their scrolls. Okay. Well, so that didn't happen. The scrolls stayed sealed up. Okay. There's actually Simchat Torah actually has a lot of shadows to the Messiah. Okay, Jesus says he's the Word. Okay, and with the Torah ceremony that they do every Sabbath in the synagogue is the Torah is like tucked behind. They call it the ark. So it's tucked. There's like doors. It's like tucked behind the doors. And then they have this whole ceremony where the Torah scrolls get taken out and they are walked around the synagogue and people kiss the Torah scrolls. Okay. So it's this whole picture of like the Messiah that's hidden, and then he comes out and there's a big celebration and everyone kisses him. Okay. And so that same picture is like repeated on Simchat Torah. But even more so, they do dance, lots of dancing. It's a very, like, joyous holiday. Okay. But that did not happen because of this war. It got, put on hold, and so then it says many will go back and forth. In Exodus, we read about people going back and forth with the sword. Okay. So that could be happening. And then it says knowledge will increase. So now we know more of who supports Israel because of this war. Okay. And then what's interesting is Daniel saw two people standing on the two banks of the river, one on the right and one on the left. Okay. And Daniel, let's see. And someone says to a man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river, like, "How long will it be until the end of these wonders?" So I'm wondering if the fact that there's a guy on the right side of the river and a guy on the left side of the river, like working together, if that's kind of a wonder, because it is kind of a wonder, because we have Biden who's really on the left side of the political, he stands to the left politically, and then we have Netanyahu who stands to the right politically. And so it was kind of a wonder that they were kind of getting together to work on this Saudi deal. But we also see them, kind of working together or whatever with this war in Israel. Okay, so how long? Okay. And this man who was dressed in linen, who was above the waters of the river. So if Biden is the beast from the sea, this man is someone who doesn't, dip into the waters. Okay. And so it's interesting that because this man is raising his right hand and his left hand, so emphasizing that we got someone on the right and someone on the left. And he said that it would be for a time, and half a times. Okay. And then so I highlighted in orange, as soon as they finish shattering the power of the holy people. Okay, so what happened with the hostage deal is the power, Israel was making progress in the battle in Gaza, but then they were put on hold. Okay, and so with this peace deal, Biden was shattered the power of the holy people. Okay, for a time. Okay. And so what was really interesting about the hostage deal, it was 3.5 months, 3.5 months after August 9th, which was, remember, August 9th, look at the top of the page. That's when the Wall Street Journal announced the peace deal, the Saudi Arabia peace deal. Okay. So that would be a fulfillment of time times and half a time. And I'm not really sure if there's more like, so if it's 3.5 months, like, so if something kind of happened in August, and then we have times would be like September. How does that work? September and October. Anyways, so it's 3.5 months. I don't know if we could kind of look at the events and see the breakdown matching kind of the time times and half a time, or if there's going to be another fulfillment of the time times and half a time. Okay. I mean, there probably is. There's probably going to be another fulfillment, but we're seeing one with the 3.5 months after the Saudi deal being the hostage deal. Okay. So then Daniel 12:9 goes on to say, he says, okay, let's see. He said, "Go your way, Daniel, for these words are concealed and sealed up until the end time. Many will be purged, purified, refined, but the wicked will act wickedly, and none of the wicked will understand, but those who have insight will understand. From the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished and the abomination of desolation is set up, there will be 1290 days. How blessed is he who keeps waiting and attains to the 1335 days. But as for you, go your way to the end, then you will enter into rest and rise for your allotted portion at the end of the age." Okay. So it's interesting that, Daniel 12:9 kind of matches the 1290 days. Okay. So it says, "For these words are concealed and sealed up to the end time." So Israel could not celebrate Simchat Torah because of the war. But what's also interesting is that the Saudi quote unquote peace deal was kind of concealed or sealed up sealed up because of the war. Okay. They kind of really put that on hold. Okay. And then it says, "Many will be purged, purified, and refined." Are you feeling the chastening of God even more so right now in your life? I am. And then it says, "But the wicked will act wickedly." And so, like I said, the terrorist protesters, architects of the hostage deals show wickedness. Okay, so people's wickedness are starting to show. Okay, and none of the wicked will understand. So a lot of the people that are pro-Palestinian, they don't understand that a lot of those Palestinians are wicked too. okay? Um, they're combatants, okay? They want to fight with Israel. They want to kill Jews, okay? Um, so, I mean, because like there was a Israeli hostage that escaped, but then some Palestinians found him and turned him into Hamas, okay? So they're not exactly, you know, I mean, everyone likes to think of the Palestinians as these like innocent civilians, but a lot of them just aren't all that innocent, okay? Um, and so, a lot of people don't understand that. The wicked definitely don't understand that, okay? Because they have this false religion, that they're following the false religion of Biden, like the left religion, the belief that everyone's basically good inside kind of thing. And that, they want to think they're righteous if they protect the Palestinians, okay? Um, and then it says, okay, so from the time that the regular sacrifice is abolished, okay, so from Trump's deal of the century to Biden's peace deal with Saudi Arabia, we saw that 1290 days. But then God says, how blessed is he who keeps waiting and attains to the 1335 days. So I'm wondering with the 1335 days, if that connects to Hanukkah. We'll have to wait and see. But that's my next time that I'm kind of waiting for. And I have a slide where I talk about that. So hopefully you can see how prophecy is being fulfilled. Okay, so let's look at the timing of this hostage deal, quote unquote. 70 weeks for Biden is 70 weeks after July 14, 2022 was when Biden signed the paper with Lapid talking about two-state solution. Okay, remember that 70 weeks after the deal of the century was when Netanyahu was voted out as the prime minister in Israel, and Trump was banned from Facebook and Instagram for 2 years. Okay, Trump had already lost power and Biden had already gotten in, but then we saw Netanyahu being voted out. And that was on 6/2/21. Oh, I forgot to add that. I have a slide where I put 62 and I forgot to add the 6/2 date. June 2nd, 2021 could be a type of 62. Okay. So that was 70 weeks after the deal of the century. But we also saw too, remember that 7 weeks after the deal of the century was the start of the COVID shutdown. So if you wonder if God gets angry at people that sign these papers that talk about the two-state solution, you just got to look at the judgment that God brought after Trump's deal of the century. And then, we did see, now we're seeing, we saw some judgment after Biden signed that paper with Lapid. Well, one thing is Lapid, like 7 days later, he was, oh, that's another thing to add to my chart. 7 days later, he lost power after he signed this paper with Biden. So definitely we could see by the judgments that God brings what he feels about these people that want to try to divide Israel. Except, of course, we also know that if you look at, God who says, whoever touches the apple of my eye, I forget how that verse goes, but, we see a bunch of verses like those who bless Israel or, bless Abraham's descendants will be blessed. We definitely see some verses that tell us that God wants us to take care of his people in Israel. Okay. Okay, so the whole Daniel 9:24-27, I got all those verses here. Okay, and that finishes up Daniel 9. So 70 weeks have been decreed for your people and your holy city to finish the transgression, make an end to sin. I won't read that whole list. So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, which actually could just be like the anointed one, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. Then after the 62 weeks, the anointed will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. And its end will come with a flood, even to the end there will be war, desolations are determined, and he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction. One that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes desolate. Okay. Um, so like I said, the Daniel 9 talks about the 70 years, and we saw, a fulfillment of the 70 years with Trump moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem on Israel's 70-year anniversary. For Biden, okay, so I kind of divided up to see how we're seeing the fulfillment under Trump and then under Biden. We did see Biden turn 70 in the middle of Obama's 2 terms. So I thought that was interesting. There might be other fulfillments that I didn't quite get that connect to 70 years. So we see fulfillments of the 70 years, okay? And then, but then, the angel goes on to say, okay, you got to wait, because then there's 70 weeks, and there's 7 weeks, and 62 weeks, and there's a 1-week covenant. Okay, so then on 70 weeks, like I said, Trump and Netanyahu lose power. And then for Biden, the 70 weeks would be the hostage deal. The 7 weeks, so 7 weeks after the deal of the century was the start of the shutdown. 7 years after Obama's JCPOA, that was his Iran deal that he made, which was so terrible for Israel. 7 years after that was 7/14/22, and that was when Biden signed that paper with Lapid. Okay. And then 62 weeks, we saw that Biden's electoral college vote was 62 days. So I don't know if that was, that might have been 62 days after the election, or actually I think it was probably 62 days after 11/7, when they announced Biden to be the winner. So I talked about that in one of my earlier videos. What was fascinating about that is that they were supposed to do the electoral college vote on January 6th, but then that's when Trump's people had their insurrection. Okay. So the electoral college vote got postponed to the 62nd day. So that was fascinating. Okay. What we also saw is that 62 weeks after, okay, so July 14th, 22nd, when Biden signed that paper, 62 weeks after that was 9/20/23, and that was when Biden finally met with Netanyahu. They met in New York because they had what was it, the UN Security Council was going on at the time, and so all the world leaders were in New York at the time. So Biden finally had a meeting with Netanyahu. And what were they talking about at that meeting? The Saudi deal, okay? I mean, there was more stuff too, because I'm sure Biden talked about two-state solution and all that kind of stuff. But they did talk about the Saudi deal. Okay, so we see a 62 fulfillment with Biden. Okay, what's interesting is the 62nd day of fighting. So if you take October 7th and then add up the days, but subtract the days where they had a ceasefire, if I did my math right, the 62nd day of fighting, of actual days that they fought, would be December 14th. Okay, so we'll see if something gets fulfilled on that day. Because what's interesting about, okay, it says after the 62 weeks, so maybe it wouldn't be fulfilled on December 14th, but after December 14th, it says the anointed one will be cut off and have nothing. Okay, so maybe Biden will only be in power until 12/14, and then after that time, God brings judgment. Maybe for Netanyahu, he's only in power until, it's hard to know who the anointed one is. Okay, is it Biden? Is it Netanyahu? Is it both of them? Okay. So we'll see what happens. And then we see the 1-week covenant. Okay, so I talked about the hostage deal being a fulfillment of that. under Trump, what was fascinating was, okay, so you know how we had that great American solar eclipse on August 21st, like 2017, if I'm remembering my dates right. Um, and then we're supposed to have another one next year in 2024. Like, so the middle of those two solar eclipses was, I think it was like December 14th, 2020. Okay. So that's actually kind of interesting, December 14th, because, so maybe that's another transitional date, you know. I mean, I'm looking at 12/15, but maybe the night from 12/14 to 12/15 could also be a transitional date. Okay. But what we saw in 2020 was that's when they had the first vaccine, okay, for COVID, okay. And so when you talk about a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, we saw a stop to people dying because of COVID, because of the vaccine. Okay. So if you don't think, prophecy is being fulfilled, you're just not paying attention. Okay. It's been being fulfilled. Okay. So it's fascinating. So that's that chart. And like I said, I think there was another 7, when we looked at the earlier chart, I missed a couple, another 7, and then 62 could also be, on June 2nd was what happened. Okay, June 2nd was when Netanyahu was out. Okay, so you could put that under 62. So definitely interesting. Okay, so what I'm kind of wondering is, like, okay, can we look at the timing of this deal as, like, okay, at 70 years we had the embassy move. Now at 70 weeks we've had this hostage deal. Now, are we waiting for the 70 days since the start of this war in Israel? That is actually the 8th day of Hanukkah, okay, which is December 15th. Okay, so so I'm wondering if that's what we're looking at. I mean, we'll just have to wait and see if anything happens between December 14th and December 15th. Okay. Um and so the reason why I'm kind of looking at that is that, so we read in Genesis 5 about how all the days of Lamech were 777 years and he died. So we see this like 777 number. Okay, so does that connect to the 70 years, the 70 weeks, and the 70 days? Okay, and we also see that same kind of number like is hidden in this verse in Matthew. So remember, Peter came up to Jesus and said, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me and I forgive him? And he says 7 times. And Jesus actually says to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. So I actually highlighted the 3 times in that verse of what Jesus said that you find the number 7. You find 7, 70, and then 7. So that could connect to the 7. So that could be a hidden prophecy, okay, connected to 7. So that's what I'm wondering. I'm not really sure. I mean, there is a possibility that if we're looking at 70 days of fighting, but then it wouldn't end on the 8th day of Hanukkah. It would end like a week later, if you account for the fact that they didn't fight during the hostage deal. Okay. So, but what I'm wondering is that in Jeremiah 25, it's, it talks about, okay, it says, this whole land will be a desolation and a horror, and these nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. Then it will be when 70 years are completed, I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation for their iniquity in the land of the Chaldeans, and I will make it an everlasting desolation. So we see, 70 is definitely a time of completion, okay? And then God judges the king of Babylon at at the 70 time frame. Okay, so are we going to see God judge Biden on the 70th day after when this war started? Okay. So remember that, you know, um, 70 days after the deal of the century, God brought judgment to Trump and Netanyahu, so, did he kind of, postpone, like, is he bringing judgment 70 days after the start of this war? Okay. Um, and then in Daniel 8, so this is interesting. Oh, I think that's this Daniel 9. So this actually says, I, Daniel, observed in the books the number of the years which was revealed as the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet for the completion of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. So I gave my attention to the Lord God to seek him by prayer and supplication with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. So I've been wondering if this could connect to, is God going to bring a completion to the desolations of Israel in 70 days? Okay, that's what I'm wondering. Okay. I mean, if you understand prophecy, then you kind of learn that, like, the years and the weeks and the stuff you kind of throw out and you look more at the number kind of thing. Um, Although it's funny because they threw it away in the covenant with the many actually says 1 week, and we saw like a literal fulfillment of that, but people are still missing it, okay, because they're actually looking for 7 years, not a week. So that was kind of interesting. In Zechariah, it says, Then the angel of the Lord said, O Lord of hosts, how long will you have no compassion for Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, with which you have been indignant these 70 years? Okay, so do you feel like God's maybe been angry at Israel for these, 70 days of this war? Okay. And then with the 70 days of Hanukkah, or 70 days of the war, that could be a fulfillment of the 10 weeks of testing. Okay. Because 10 weeks times 7 days equals 70 days. Okay. So we read about 10 days of testing, but that could translate to 10 weeks of testing. Okay, so all while this war is going on for 70 days. Okay, we saw there was 10 days of testing for Daniel and his friends, and then they were able to go into service for the king. Okay, definitely a prophetical shadow. Okay, so then we have our 10 days of testing, and then if we pass the test, I guess then we can go serve God, our King. Okay. And then in Revelation 2:10, and actually it'd be helpful to read the whole context of that. So if you get a chance, read more of the verses around Revelation 2:10. It says, Do not fear what you are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison, so that you will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days. Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. Okay, so the people that are cast into prison could be Israel, okay, and definitely the military in Israel, okay. Oh, but definitely, most definitely are the hostages that were cast into prison, okay. And then it says, so you will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days, okay. So are we Israel's friend during this time, or are we the Palestinians' friend during this war? Okay. But then, just when I think I have it figured out, I like find other things. So I recognize that 10 days after the 8th day of Hanukkah is Christmas, so that could actually be a 10-day testing time. I don't know. Just have to wait and see. What's interesting is then we have, so 70 days after this war started in Israel would be the 8th day of Hanukkah, but 80 days after this war started in Israel would be Christmas. Okay, so we see that 70 and 80 time frame in Psalm 90:10. It says, As for the days of our life, they contain 70 years, or if due to strength, 80 years. Yet their pride is but labor and sorrow, for soon it is gone and we fly away. So I don't know if we have to wait and attain to the 80 days after this war, which would be Christmas. We have to hang in there until Christmas. I mean, I'm hoping it's Hanukkah because that's the end of this week, but it would just be after Hanukkah, it'd just be another 10 more days. I don't know. That's why I call myself the partial prophet. Okay, what's interesting is no one knew the day or hour. When this war started in Israel, no one was expecting it. Okay. We read in Matthew 24 where it says, Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Okay. So we didn't know. So if heaven is Israel and earth is America, we didn't know that this war in Israel was going to start on October 7th. No one knew that. No one knew that the attacks on the American troops in the Middle East was going to happen on October 17th. Okay. But there could also be another fulfillment of that where I think a civil war could be starting in America, and no one might be aware of that happening when that's going to happen. Okay. So we'll have to wait and see. So, and then we read about the deluding influence, so in 2 Thessalonians, it says, Let no one in any way deceive you, for it will not come unless the apostasy comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things? For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. For this reason, God will send upon them a deluding influence, so that they will believe what is false, in order that they all may be judged who did not believe the truth, but took pleasure in wickedness. Okay, really powerful verses. Okay, so it says the apostasy comes first, so are we seeing this a type of falling away happening during this war with these anti-Israel protesters? Okay, and then it says the man of lawlessness is revealed. Okay, so Biden's being revealed as one who does not follow God's law. Okay, I do think there might be another fulfillment with Trump, because I definitely think he's a man of lawlessness too, getting revealed. But let's look at Biden right now for these verses. So they say the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship. Okay, so Biden is definitely sinning himself, as, I don't know, like the king of the world, the one who can make, like, call the shots for Israel, call the shots for America, call the shots for the world. Okay. I mean, we definitely see that with his climate change agenda, but we definitely see that with his agenda with Israel and the war. Okay. He's gonna, so it says he takes his seat in the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. So it's like, I mean, Biden actually went to Israel and is like saying, he's telling Netanyahu, like, I know how to fight this war. America learned from the wars that we fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we can give you wisdom so you could fight this war and not make the same mistakes that we make. So somehow he thinks he's so smart that he can tell Netanyahu how to fight this war. Okay, so he's taken his seat in Israel, the temple of God, displaying himself as being God. He thinks he knows more than anyone else. Okay. So it says the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. So right now, Biden is restraining Israel when they're trying to fight this war. Okay. And then it goes on to say, God will send upon them, all the people at that time, a deluding influence, so they will believe what is false. Okay, so so we're seeing that people are deluded about the Palestinians. We're seeing that people are deluded about being able to have peace with the Palestinians. So we definitely see this deluding influence. Okay. All these people that are following this false religion of Biden, okay, which was really probably started with Obama. And then I definitely think we're in the time of Jacob's trouble, labor pains. For her to cry as of a woman in labor, the anguish as of one giving birth to her first child, the cry of the daughter of Zion, grasping for breath, stretching out her hands, saying, "Ah, woe is me, for I faint before murderers." Okay, so Israel fainting before Hamas. Okay. Um, so Jeremiah 2 talks about Jacob's trouble. I won't read this whole thing, it's really long. But that also talks about a pain like a woman. So it actually talks about man with his hands on his loins as a woman in childbirth. Okay. So that would connect to Israel. It is the time of Jacob's distress. And what's interesting is that God says your wound is incurable. And so if you understand God's or Israel's enemies and like just kind of the size of the problem, it's definitely a God-sized problem. Okay. I mean, these terrorists, just as soon as Israel's trying to knock one down, another one's popping up. They're all over the place. They're like, um, what is that? Is it cats? They reproduce like kittens or cats or, um, anyways, they just keep popping up all over the place. Um, and it's not just Israel, Israel's trying to fight Hamas, but if Hezbollah wants to start a war with Israel, then they would have to deal with that. The Houthi rebels are being annoying and stopping the shipping in the area. It's kind of a real big problem. Um, so it's hard, and especially too when you look at all the pressure on Israel to like get rid of Hamas without killing any Palestinians, which is kind of impossible because Hamas uses Palestinians as human shields. Okay. So it kind of looks like an impossible task for Israel, to eliminate them. And especially too, because like the leaders of Hamas are hiding in Qatar, hiding in Qatar. So I have some of the verses. Okay, so it says, "Terror is on every side. Put on sackcloth and roll in ashes." Oh, I know. I talked about this in my last video, but when I listened to my video, I realized that I sort of missed it because I wrote, "Mourn as for an only son." Another way to look at that verse is to recognize that Israel is the only Jewish nation in the world. Okay. So we want to mourn for Israel as for an only son. Okay. It's like Israel, the nation of Israel is the only son of God, of God. So, because there are a lot of parallels when you kind of read about the Messiah, there's a lot of parallels, like the suffering Messiah kind of connects to the suffering of the Jewish people. There's just a lot of parallels, okay, similar callings. Because Israel suffers in the same way that Jesus suffered. Anyways, so it says, "Terror is on every side, O daughter of my people, put on sackcloth and roll in ashes, mourn as for an only son, a lamentation most bitter, for suddenly the destroyer will come upon us. I have made you an assayer and a tester among my people that you may know and assay their way." Okay. So God's wanting us to mourn during this war. Okay. Because, Jewish people are getting killed. And then we could see how God's using this war as an assayer and a tester. Okay. To test people's way. Okay. So Abraham was tested at the binding of Isaac because he was willing to let Isaac be a burnt offering. So that would be like a picture of those people that are willing to let Israel defend itself, rather than the ones that think Israel needs to have a ceasefire. Okay. Joseph tested his brothers to see if they would stand up for Benjamin's sake. Okay. We see Jesus separating the sheep and the goats. Okay. You want to be a sheep that, feeds his people and prays for his people and all that kind of stuff. Okay, on the seventh day, Vashti would not come with royal crown. Okay, so on the seventh day, Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, but also the seventh day could connect to the seventh king, which I believe is Biden. So Vashti would not come with royal crown. The crown, we see a woman in Revelation that has a crown of 12 stars. So this Vashti does not love Israel, okay, because she doesn't have a royal crown of 12 stars, okay? So that could be a picture of Biden, okay? We want to be like Ruth with Naomi. We want to be like Jonathan with David. Okay, so the 1335 days. So remember I said, it says, Daniel 12:12, how blessed is he who keeps waiting and attains to the 1335 days. So I was wondering that maybe a connection with 1335 to Hanukkah, I'm not really sure, is maybe day one. Okay, is when we look at that number 1335, 1 plus 3 plus 3 equals 7. So that could be 7 days of Hanukkah. And then the 5 would be the 8th day of Hanukkah. And so that would connect to, well, we see a division on the 8th day of Hanukkah. So we just got to wait and see if it gets filled out that day. I definitely think, I'm kind of missing the 1335, like how that gets fulfilled. Okay. But and so far I haven't seen, I was thinking for Hanukkah, like the first day of Hanukkah, we would see something happen. And then we would see something for like the first 3 days of Hanukkah, or the second, third, and fourth day of Hanukkah. And then we would see something on the fifth, sixth, and seventh day of Hanukkah. And the fifth, sixth, and 7 days, or like the 6th and the 7 days of Hanukkah, actually connect to the days of fighting in the last couple chapters of the book of Esther. Okay, because they fight on December 13th and December 14th, I think, are the days that they fight. And then some people rest on the 14th and some people rest on the 15th. Okay, so maybe like Trump's people rest on the 14th and Jesus's people rest on the 15th, or maybe it has to do with what happens. There's, like 2 different places where there's fighting, like there's fighting in the provinces and there's fighting in the city. So that might connect to, there's, we know there's fighting going on in Israel, and then maybe we'll see fighting happen in America, or maybe that just connects to the fighting around the world. I don't know. So, but the only thing that I've seen so far is that on day 1 of Hanukkah was when we saw the UN was voting for a ceasefire. That was on December 8th. And America actually voted no, which was kind of surprising. I mean, just because Biden's kind of wishy-washy about Israel, the UN lady, I think she's a lady now, I think she might be okay when it comes to Israel. I'm not really sure. But that was good that they actually said they weren't going to, because the UN wanted to force a ceasefire on Israel. So that's all kind of interesting. Just quickly wanted to talk about Biden's 9/11 connections. His birthday on the Hebrew calendar is actually a 9/11 birthday. Okay. He was declared the winner 9 months, 11 days after the deal of the century on 11/7/2020. What was interesting this year is that on 9/11/2023 was when Biden made his hostage deal with Iran. He was trying to get some Americans released from Iran, and he released 6 billion of Iranian dollars back into Iran, which we know whenever you send money, allow Iran to have money, they just use it for terrorism. So it just was not that good of a deal. And then it just emboldens like America's enemies to take more people hostage, to try to get more money or whatever. Just not a good deal. You don't negotiate with terrorists. And then on 11/9/2023, so that's a type of 9/11. That's actually the anniversary of Kristallnacht, okay? So what we saw was Israel agreed to America's demands for 4-hour pauses in fighting starting on that day. Okay. So definitely a connection to Biden. I wrote in here the 9/11 connections with Trump. Trump was the 45th president, which connects to 9. If he returns, he'll be the 47th president, which connects to 11. And then we have this thing in Israel too, where Herzog is the 11th president of Israel, and Netanyahu, they're calling him the 9th prime minister, even though he's really kind of like the 20th or the 21st. So we see kind of a 9/11 picture there happening too. So are we in the days of the last days? Well, if you look at the numbers, I think we might be. Okay, so so I was wondering if like Biden's peace, Saudi deal could be considered like the 7th peace deal, where like 7 would be a number of completion, and then altogether we had like 3 abominations of Biden, because first he signed that paper with Lapid on October 27th of last year. The U.S. brokered a maritime agreement between Israel and Lebanon, which was actually giving up some of Israel's sea land to Lebanon. Okay, so that's why he's the beast from the sea, because he's trying to give away Israel's sea land. Okay, and then we got the third one would be the Saudi deal. Okay, but then I'm wondering too if there's 3 more abominations. So you have these 3, major big things that Biden did, and then during this war we've seen, because we read in, when Joseph is in jail with the cupbearer and the baker, he says like, for the vine, the branches are 3 days, and then there's 3 more days. So do we have like the 3 branches of what Biden was going to do, or do we have the 3 baskets of what Biden? Well, actually, like I've had Biden be the baker. Okay, and with the 3rd basket, the birds are actually eating the bread, and so that would be, so if that connects to like a Saudi deal, then we're seeing the war in Israel that came because of the Saudi deal. So bread being eaten, birds eating bread, would be a picture of Jewish people getting eaten. Where bread connects to the body of Messiah, because Jesus is Jewish. But I'm wondering, so then Joseph says, okay, there's the 3 baskets, but then there's 3 more days. Okay, so I'm wondering if we're seeing 3 more abominations of Biden, because what we saw is that Biden was actually in Israel on October 18th. Okay, so remember we read that verse about he, sets himself up in heaven, or what did it say? Oh, is it too far back? It's too far back. I can't find it. Anyways, where he sets himself up like God. Okay, so Biden actually went to Israel during this war to give Netanyahu advice on how to fight this war. What was really interesting is that U.S. was attacked. The U.S. bases were attacked for the first time on October 17th, the day before. Okay. So that was interesting. Then, like I said, we had the 4-hour pauses on 11/9, and then we had this hostage deal and ceasefire on 11/21 and 22. So does that mean we're kind of at the end of what to expect from Biden, and then God will bring judgment? Okay, that's what I'm wondering. I don't think there's anything new on that slide. They built a gallows. So in the book of Esther, Haman built a gallows for Mordecai, who spoke good on behalf of the king. And it was 50 cubits high. So we saw that Israel was attacked 50 years after the Yom Kippur War. So you could see that this war, this attack from Hamas, could be this, like a type of the gallows that was built for Mordecai. But then we see a reversal where Haman gets killed on the gallows that he actually built for Mordecai. And so that could be what's happening right now in Israel, is that, now God allowed this reversal to happen, and now Hamas is being killed the same way that they tried to kill the Jewish people in Israel. Okay. So, and I'm also kind of wondering if that there's something, I don't know if Netanyahu maybe is kind of angry after this hostage deal, and so maybe he's just like going like gangbusters, to just fight this war in Gaza. I'm wondering if that's possible. Um, um, because I'm kind of wondering, maybe the legs of iron on Daniel's statue could connect to Trump and Netanyahu. And so right now we're seeing Netanyahu is bringing judgment to Hamas. He's one of the legs of iron. And then I think Trump could be the other leg of iron that brings judgment to Biden and his followers. Or also we could be moving into the feet. Of the statue, with which is all last day stuff. You know what? Now that I'm talking, I realized I missed something really important that I wanted to emphasize. I don't remember if I said this, but I'll make sure to say it again because, okay, in this verse, I wanted to point out. So after the, okay, so in verse 26, it says, after the 62 weeks. Oh wait, let's see. Okay, its end will come with the flood, even to the end there be war, desolations are determined. And then it talks about the firm covenant for 1 week, and then it says, on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate. So I wanted to emphasize that, I think we're, really just at the end of these verses right now in history. So we can expect a flood, we can expect war, we can expect desolations. So one of the things about the flood is that could be a picture of Biden being the beast from the sea. He could be the flood. But they've also talked about a second fulfillment. They talked about flooding the tunnels in Gaza. So maybe that's going to happen. But a flood could also just be a picture of war, or people coming to fight a war. Or it could be a picture of the protest. But then it says, even to the end, there'll be war, so we can maybe expect this war in Israel to continue until the end. And then it says, desolations are determined. Because then it says, and on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction. One that is decreed is poured out on the one who makes desolate. So God has prophecies of the people who bring destruction, to be to have a destruction poured out on them. Okay, just like we saw with Hamas, when I talked about the sorry, let me get back to it. The gallows that was built for Mordecai. Okay, so that's the deal about that verse. So this is, so before I thought maybe Trump and BLM were the legs of iron. And then that maybe, I mean, so maybe there's another fulfillment of the legs of iron, because right now maybe we're with, Netanyahu and Biden, or, can't figure out how to make that work. But then the feet, anyways, I can't figure it out, but I definitely think we're at the legs of iron would be maybe the picture of the war, and then with the feet too, another type of war, but just the final war. I mean, there could be, well, I was going to say maybe there's a part of Messiah in there, but actually Messiah is the rock that gets cut out that crushes the statue. But I wrote the eighth king does destruction. So we're definitely going to see destruction from Trump. And then, then he gets judged for his destruction. Okay. So, in Matthew, it says when you see the abomination of desolation, then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. We should, so the abomination of desolation could be both Biden's Saudi deal, but also the Hamas attack. Okay. And so then you're supposed to flee to the mountains. That could be a picture of, Jesus's followers should support Israel. Whoever's on the housetop should not go down to get things out of his house. So is that Hamas on the housetop shouldn't go down to get things in their house? Is that the Palestinians? Is that Biden on the housetop? Whoever's in the field must not turn back to get his cloak. That could be a picture of, Trump's peep wanting to turn back to make him president, getting a coat for him, a coat of authority. So October 7th was on a Sabbath. It says, pray that your flight will not be in the winter or on a Sabbath. For then there will be great tribulation, such has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will be. Unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. So it's highly possible that this war is only a 70 or 80-day war, okay? Then God will cut it short, okay? Then it says, if anyone says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe him. I mean, that could be talking about Trump. It could also be talking about Biden. I didn't put that in there. It says, wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. The corpse could be Biden. The corpse could be the Palestinians. So anyways, and then it, I already talked about this. They didn't know the day or the hour. Hour connects to the judgment of Babylon happens at the hour. The Son of Man comes at an hour. When the thief comes, when the Antichrist comes, no worship in mountain nor in Jerusalem in a particular hour. The hour of testing and judgment. Those all connect. Okay, sour grapes. Okay, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. So Netanyahu does all this stuff and the children's teeth are set on edge. Biden does all this stuff and our teeth are set on edge. But a time's coming when everyone will die for his own iniquity. Each man who eats the sour grapes, his teeth will be set on edge. Okay. So so it's interesting that we find 9/11 and 1335 both in the Back to the Future movie. Okay. What's interesting with the 1335, it connects to the lone pine. And then Marty is the 5. So that would kind of connect to, what I talked about with Hanukkah, where you have the 7 days, and then, Marty would be a picture of the 8th day. And that's right when they're trying to kill Doc, but he ends up living. That could be a picture of Israel. So Marty could be a picture of the Messiah. And we're not supposed to go either left or right. Okay, so what we see is thieves on both sides of Jesus. Both Biden and Netanyahu are wanting to be part of the Saudi deal. So Isaac was 60 when both Esau and Jacob were born. Okay. So that actually, I was rethinking that twin story with Esau and Jacob. So actually, because I was wondering if Jacob holding on to Esau's foot was Jacob trying to keep Esau from stomping on his head. But I also wonder if it's a picture of, Biden holding on to Netanyahu's foot, saying you can't fight the war the way you want to. I'm going to hold on to your feet and control how you fight this war. Okay. Because what's interesting is that Isaac was 60 when the twins were born, and the Hamas attack was 60 days after the Saudi deal. Okay. Um, so, anyways, so if you see Israel burning on the right and America burning on the left, or something like that, or both the countries burning, then you're out of time, or something like that. Or, like God bringing judgment to the, that would relate to the guy above the river. We want to be with the guy who's above the river, which is probably a picture of Jesus, and so God's going to bring judgment to the guy on the right, which is Netanyahu, and the guy on the left, which is Biden. So, anyways, so then it says the great city was split into 3 parts, and the cities of the nation fell. Babylon the Great was remembered for God to give her the cup of the wine of his fierce wrath. So if there's a connection with Babylon to Biden, God's going to, the cupbearer returns and gives the cup of God's wrath into Pharaoh's hands. So that could be, we could see Trump returning to bring God's wrath to Biden. Okay. And this great city is split into 3 parts. So that could be a picture of America split into Biden followers, Trump followers, and then Messiah followers. Okay. So there you go. Covenant with many. Now we know who the Antichrist is. In my mind, I'm pretty confident. It just depends how you define the Antichrist. I've said for a while in my videos that there's 2 beasts. There's the beast from the sea and the beast from the earth. Okay. And I think Biden is definitely the beast from the sea, and then Trump is the beast from the earth, And the 666 all kind of relates to Trump. Like the not buying or selling is like Trump. We've seen, even when he's not president, is he doesn't allow certain Republicans to be in power, like like if he doesn't give them his support, they lose, the ability to, be in power. We saw that with when they were trying to find the Speaker of the House. It was like only the people that Trump supported were allowed to, run for Speaker of the House. So you got to see that it's being fulfilled, just because you got to drop your expectation that we're going to get an actual physical mark on our wrist or on our forehead, or we're going to see people with actual physical marks, and see it more as a metaphorical thing, or a spiritual thing, that the hand relates to what you do and the mind reacts, connects to what you think, and so the people who get this mark, it's affecting how they walk, it affecting what they do and affecting what they think. So that's the deal. So and the 6 number definitely connects to Trump because he's the 6th president, but we've seen Biden do a lot of things on days connected to 7. So that's the deal. So thank you for listening. I really appreciate you tuning in. So just look up for your redemption draws nigh. I think we can expect the Messiah any day now. He definitely fulfills the concept of the 8 lights on Hanukkah, but he also fulfills all the things with Christmas, so that's why I'm not really sure which day, but both of those are high watch days. So watch what happens on those days, and so we'll see what happens. So hang in there. Your redemption draws nigh. I pray God gives you the grace to wait and attain for the return of the Messiah. So thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. Take care and God bless.